I want to start off with a question because you point out this credibility gap, and I'm going to read it because it's so good. You say most sales pros sell stuff they've never used to people whose jobs they've never had in industries they've never worked. Unpack that for me.
This dawned on me in my career. We were selling big data analytics projects, and my job as a sales guy was to prospect for companies who had dated or ineffective ETL tools. That stands for extract, transform, I believe, if memory serves, and load. I'd be calling them up and saying, what current ETL are you using? And they would start to talk, and I'd be jotting, just trying to capture as much as I can and kind of fake it, just to suss out, are they upset with what's going on? I can't really interpret the why of why they're upset, but I'm just trying to figure out, are these guys upset, so I can book a meeting, bring in a subject matter expert to go for, and for me to qualify a little bit. And I'm just like, can't even spell ETL, let alone really understand, like, what is it doing and why. I had a bit of a credibility gap. They're talking to me. Maybe I caught them at a good time. I did what I could to get them to the next sort of phase, but I felt like I've never built a data warehouse. I've never used an ETL tool to extract, transform, and load data. I've never built a front end layer, which is the reporting side of things. I've never built a dashboard or out of the box reports or custom reports. I've never done any of this stuff.
Right.
Here I am, I'm talking to directors of business intelligence and analytics, vice presidents of analytics at large companies, trying to figure out, maybe you got a problem, we could help you guys. And yes, we have the solution to that problem. And I just didn't always feel great about that. So when I went into the sales training business for myself, sort of with my first iteration of using humor to shine a light on problems, I started to realize, like, most of these salespeople really struggle to relate to their buyers, because not only have they never done their buyer's job, they haven't even been properly trained on what their job is and what they're trying to achieve and how their solution is going to make their lives better. And I think that's really pervasive and really persistent across sales. There's the odd time I'll speak with, let's say, a manufacturer, and I'll speak with the sales leader, and he says, yeah, a lot of our people come from the manufacturing world. They've moved into sales roles. They're engineers, they're technical, but they're not great salespeople.
Right.
But the best salespeople can straddle those two worlds, because they really understand enough about the buyer. They've done what they can to place themselves in their shoes, and at the same time try and serve them and help solve problems which they know are preventing them from getting ahead.
I'm curious how pervasive this problem is because I've experienced it myself. I remember when I first started selling into HR, I'd never done that role before. I wasn't really clear on their pain. There's at least two levels here. One is the business acumen, just to have that conversation with somebody who's done the role. And another one is the actual sales skills to move somebody forward, to help them make a decision, yes or no. Is that the credibility gap that you're pointing out there?
Well, look, if you're talking to a head of cybersecurity at a manufacturing company, you can articulate, certain. If you can interpret their world after asking them, can you explain to me how your team operates and what you have in place, and you can't react to that in any way. If you can't innately understand their world, and the challenges they're facing and what they have in place to try and mitigate those risks and challenges, understand their objectives, they're not going to take you very seriously.
And we've touched on this earlier. We talked about, sales training. Why are reps not getting the information they need to be able to execute well? What's going on there?
I think we would need to go interview a whack of chief revenue officers. We also might want to interview a lot of sales enablement people. And I'm willing to bet that perhaps each one of those would give a different answer.
I think you're right. Do you think because of where we are right now with the ineffectiveness of your average seller and the load that they carry on an organization, how much is AI just going to sweep away the average sellers?
Oh, it's $1 million question. Look, I think the more complex a solution is, the less likely it is to get rid of a seller. I mean, look, the transactional stuff, the commodity stuff, that's going to get wiped away. But the sales roles where point of view is necessary, industry insights, rapport, relationships, connecting the dots, being able to build relationships with multiple stakeholders. I don't see AI doing away with that role. Time will tell, I suppose.
In terms of this gap in seller effectiveness, why do we have so many average sellers in your mind? My take is this, is that it's easy to get into. So it brings in a lot of people that just naturally are going to be average. They didn't wake up and say, oh my goodness, I want to be a salesperson. You don't have necessarily the drive for somebody to learn the craft, right? Learn the audience they're selling to, learn the table stakes, learn to have these conversations, to build those relationships, to move a deal forward. What's your take?
So I think the reason why so many people on LinkedIn talk about sales is because over the last 10, 12 years, there's just been an explosion of technology that's allowed people to build other technologies, which means people are building technology for niche ideas. But guess what? Investors on startups are the way that some people with gambling issues like to plunk chips down on roulette tables. And of course, once they get that investment, whether it's venture capital or private equity, they want to squeeze the juice and they want to make it happen quick and they want to return quick. And therefore, a lot of pressure coming from the investors trickles down all the way to the reps. And it feels like a lot of stuff is designed to happen at a speed that's not natural. But more importantly, there's a lot of people in those chairs there's a lot of need for salespeople to grow on investor timelines. And
Yeah. It raises a really interesting point. In my mind, there is an inordinate amount of pressure put on salespeople to actually execute. If you step back from the microcosm of a seller and a prospect, there's a much bigger story at play here. Everything relating to their position in the market. How is the prospect viewing them? What is their position? What is their message? Are they really tapped into the problem that needs solving and it's landing with the prospects? Because that's a very expensive bet if you haven't taken the time to do that analysis. Then what happens is we get really excited about what we want to sell and let's just give it to the sales team, start cold calling. There isn't the infrastructure, the support to carry that through. And so you've got MQLs, but you have no SQLs, right? If we use B2B terms, a seller doesn't have the air cover they need from the brand to bring this to market. There's not a clear strategy that's phased and rolled out. It's just like a switch that turns on, go. Let's see the money come in. That's the mindset I've seen. Is that a fair statement or am I speaking out of turn here?
it's a fair statement. I just don't know who's going to listen and say that's true. We need to change the way we do things, go slower, be more methodical, make investments in our people, and do things maybe over a longer time horizon, because that's not the mindset. Coming back to your original question, too many people in sales roles that aren't really meant to be salespeople. There's more sales jobs than there are qualified salespeople or people who want to get into sales in the first place. And ultimately, there's no patience to nurture and develop the ones who aren't meant to be there in the first place. And that leads to a lot of people being left in their wake. They might try it again and again, but eventually I think those people do get filtered out.
Do you think this was why sales training doesn't work? Is it because we're trying to move sellers too fast to hit the number to actually give them the time they need to execute? Or is it more you need to change the way you do the training so it sticks? What's your take there?
Again, I don't know if it's always the training. If you're in the wrong career, it doesn't matter what training you get, you're not going to connect the dots with your brain and it's not making sense. You probably weren't meant to be there in the first place. Like I know I took a bunch of trainings in my day. There was always one or two things I took away from each one. And I kind of package up those one or two things with one another, and that became my toolkit and how I operated. I didn't know what the hell I was getting into when I started. I thought sales was a job where you put your feet up on the desk, someone calls you and says, "I'd like to buy $100,000 worth of software, please. Like I'll send you purchase order. Can you get me an agreement?" I thought I was going to be an order taker. Not at all. You realize you're a consultant and you have to uncover problems. You have to help them see the value of those problems and how much they're costing the firm. and help them realize like, well, our stuff is going to be cheaper to implement than it is for you to keep doing business the way you're doing things. And it's a hard thing to grasp if you've never thought about it that way before. Uh,
Mm,
I don't think a lot of people grow up thinking about how that happens, or that companies are even procuring software in the first place.
mm,
I'm just picking on software because that's the world I come from.
right.
Um,
There are people in the role that no matter what you do, it's not going to help. That speaks to a sales leadership problem. Why are we not managing them out or helping them find a different spot in the organization? What's going on there?
because it's not,
Um,
well, sorry, just I got to, because as a
Go
CEO,
ahead.
it's not my job necessarily. I'm trying to grow these numbers. Maybe someone belongs in customer success. Their job isn't necessarily to find new roles for people and sort of steward them. It's to hit numbers and do what they have to get there. And if it means just cutting bait with somebody, they're going to do it. It means I see enough, in small organizations, I'm sure people jump from one revenue function to another.
Right.
That happens. And big companies too, but at that point, it becomes a lot of politicking because you're dealing with your sales manager probably, and maybe not much else. I'm speaking a little bit generically.
No, that's fair. Let me give you another one, and feel free to cut me off if you disagree. I love it. So the traditional sales approach is hit the pain, fear, uncertainty, doubt. There's truth in that. If you're not solving a problem, it's going to be pretty difficult to sell somebody, right? No pain, no sale, classic Sandler line from the 50s. That said, we are living in a world of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So buyers are, with everything from war to politics to all the things that are upsetting us, we're all sort of operating with like low grade anxiety. And I'm a huge fan of the Jolt effect and their study of 2.5 million sales conversations that identified, hey, you know what's really screwing your sale up? Indecision, because people are afraid.
Yep.
Buyers are fearful. They're not stalling. They're afraid. They're afraid of making a mistake. It's not FOMO, fear of missing out. It's FOMU, fear of messing up.
Yep.
Curious your take on that, because I can tell you right now, the sales world has still not caught up.
I would gather that if they've analyzed 2.5 million sales conversations,
Yeah.
their pool of research is stronger than mine. So I would defer to them. But look, in my own experience, I mean, even selling my own services, listen, taking no decision at all or not going with a competitor even is definitely the thing we lose most to, because people want to shop. They want to show their bosses, I'm trying to add value. I'm trying to look for solutions. But sometimes they're not able to get the money. Someone above them is like, I don't know, things are tight. I think we can just muddle along and make go of
Status
this.
quo.
It's not their money. That's why.
I did some analysis recently for a sales organization, and I was just stunned at the results of the close lost breakdown. It was thousands of lost deals due to status quo and indecision.
Yep.
Very few to price, very few to competitors. It was such a stark contrast, which again solidifies my point. It's an argument that I'm making. I believe that as a seller, to your point, when you bridge the credibility gap, what you're doing as a seller is you're creating a safe environment for your buyer to make a decision themselves, to boost their self-confidence. Because if you don't have that credibility, if you don't have that business acumen, if you haven't been in their shoes, or at least you haven't done the research to study what their life is like, and this is not hard to do. Whatever the industry, I could get a pretty good grasp of it in less than 30 minutes. If we're not doing that, then that's not going to reduce the fear enough for them to even continue the conversation.
Perfect example. I was talking with someone yesterday who's got a very small sales team, and they told me that they have no problem at the top of the funnel. They're getting a lot of leads. Their salesperson is going right to a demo. They are then getting yeah, this looks cool. They're giving them a proposal, and then they're not hearing anything back.
Yeah, no pain.
That's it. And so I asked him, well, are they not kind of qualifying if there's a pain? And the answer was, I don't think so. Like they know they're not,
Yeah.
and it's a small team. The point is he knows that needs to get changed before they grow. He needs to fix the people he has or change that. It's a very oversimplistic example of why a lot of indecision happens. They're not running discovery properly. They're not asking the right questions. They're not disqualifying early. Maybe they're operating from a place of scarcity and just, I want to put out proposals to throw a bunch of, what against the wall and hope something sticks.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, but take any sales team, the number one problem they're going to have is discovery. They're not good at it. They're not doing it. They're trying to get to the sale. They haven't been trained well. They're not talking to the right person. They haven't vetted them out, et cetera. So they can't get to the strategic business pain that could land a significant deal. I think the other side of it, it's like, okay, we're still wrestling with that. And we haven't even gotten to, hey, do you understand how to help somebody make a decision? Do you understand how to remove fear? Can you judge indecision and help somebody move forward? Do you know how to do that? Because you're going to need those skills to actually help an indecisive buyer who's afraid to make a decision. You're going to have to help them. And that requires a series of steps. But very few people are talking about it. We're still talking about the classic scenario, like, let's at least get pain on the table so we can have a value proposition conversation, let alone now it's decision time. How do we actually help the organization make the decision? We're so far from that, at least in the conversations that I'm having. What's your take?
Listen, I agree, because that lack of credibility means they can't run effective discovery, because sure, you can ask a bunch of questions that a framework or methodology proposes, but if they reply and you have no way to interpret that answer and to dig deeper and to get a couple of what I call tangent questions going to broaden the conversation, you're not going to be able to disqualify them or qualify them properly. You're still flying a little blind. I think companies are making huge investments in frameworks and methodologies when sellers still don't really understand who my buyer is, what his objective is or their objective, and which problems are they struggling with and which one can I eliminate so that they can get freer passage to move forward and achieve those objectives. And there's just a disconnect. There's a lack of understanding. And I don't think a methodology or framework is going to get sales leaders where they need to go. It's not going to help sales leaders get their sellers to where they want them to help them get where they want to go.
What I like about what you're saying, Jon, you're putting methodology aside and you're saying, do your buyers understand the concrete nature of the work that needs to be done? Because if you can't get to the concrete nature of your buyer's world, your methodology isn't going to really help you.
It doesn't matter. I can ask you any questions I want. If you answer them in a foreign language, I can't really follow on.
I want to throw three best practices that I've heard in my sales career at you, and you tell me if it rings true for you or not, that you shouldn't do anymore. In other words, it's a best practice in sales to follow up. And I would argue that actually, if you're a good seller, you kind of know if you've got somebody on the line or not. And so what the traditional follow-up does is it actually trains the average seller to chase deals that are never going to happen. And what that does is it builds a pipeline that is a false revenue forecast for your organization. I have a mentor of mine who calls it pipeline furniture. It's really comfortable. It feels good, right? It's sitting there. Look at all that revenue we could tap into. But those were dead deals long ago. Stop following up, get it out of your pipeline and move on. So that's one. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I think the biggest mistake I would make in deals was not booking a meeting right in the meeting. Let's get our follow-up in the calendar. You can tell me to go away at that time. If you're willing to do that, take that step with me, it means has been some value on this call. And maybe you need to circulate it internally and maybe get some feedback to see this isn't a priority for us. Great. Well, on that call, you can tell me that we're done here. Following up, chasing people, to me, it's a big waste of time. Either they're going to want to talk to you again or they won't. And they'll tell you, the ones who tell me when I ask them to follow up now, hey, are you okay if we put a touch point on the calendar, maybe, I don't know, 2 weeks from now? You can give me some feedback on what your colleagues thought or whatever that step was. And they go, well, you know what? I prefer to just hold off on that. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Because if you can commit to like a slot where you can get to tell me no, even if it's a 15-minute slot, there's really no point I'm getting the hint here. Loud. Number 2, Ted.
Number 2, the 80-20 rule. Somewhere somebody wrote that sellers should let the prospect talk to 80% of the time and the seller should only speak 20% of the time. And interesting, I'm going to quote Jolt Effect again because they measured this And they found that their top sellers actually use a very different ratio. Maybe you've heard it?
No.
50-50. And their reasoning was a good seller, if you've got a prospect talking 80% of the time, they're leading the conversation. You're not leading. And sales is leadership. And their take is the professionals will step in and they'll course correct. They'll gently challenge. They'll provide options. They'll provide alternatives. They'll help people make a decision. And to do that, you have to be engaged in a back and forth conversation. That's one of my favorite ones to quote when I'm training sellers. It's like, where did you hear that? They always bring it up. Whenever I ask the question, hey, how often should you talk? Oh, 80-20. Who came up with that?
I have to walk away from a call getting certain information. If I talk the whole time, I will not get it. I hadn't really thought about how much should one be speaking, but I would say that if a sales rep is talking 3/4 of the time, that's not healthy. As long as you're getting what you need and you're giving them what they need, I mean, that sounds like a win-win.
I've got a few others, but let me just do one more. Never interrupt your prospect. Not true. I used to teach that. There's a time and a space. You've got to let your prospect finish. And you want to make sure that you're holding back. But there are other times to collaboratively overlap. It's natural. You did it to me. You're like, hey, I got to interject. I'm like, hey, do it. That's called collaborative overlap. It's not really interrupting. And to your point earlier, if we make these hard and fast rules, we lose humanity. We lose humor. That would be another one. I'll give you a fourth. You know this one. There are organizations that they don't believe humor is involved in sales. It's like, are you kidding me? That is probably your go-to move to lower somebody's defenses. Now, you're the expert here, but curious your take on those two.
If you're a really top-notch salesperson and you're structured and you're methodical and you're thoughtful and you listen and you're able to put forth something of value to the buyer to better educate them, make them feel comfortable with how you can help, I don't think you need to be funny. I watched one rep who was very successful. As far as I could tell, he had zero sense of humor, but he was very successful. And at the same time, I think it's great because at the end of the day, these are just our jobs. And we got to have a little fun along the way. We got to be able to like and trust people we do business with. I don't enjoy dealing with a prospect who doesn't want to laugh. If they're too serious, I'm probably not the right sales rep for them because I do want to try and entertain a little bit at appropriate moments in relevant ways and make powerful points through humor. But there's time and place for everything. Humor is a lubricant of some kind in relationships. And firm believer in it. Doesn't mean you can't get the job done without it, though. I'm not here to tell anyone how they should and shouldn't sell.
Those humor moments, injecting that, it reduces fear. When a buyer is fearful, they don't buy. But when you put them at ease with an offhanded joke, a little self-deprecation here or there, well-timed and well-placed, it has a real impact. The science on this is through the roof. Any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, my former life, and I still do it in my current life, is all about crafting hyper-relevant humor that's meant to shine a light on a problem that a vendor can solve for their market, for their buyers. Like sort of paint pictures of how and why that problem sucks for the target persona you're talking to. And if they laugh, they're essentially acknowledging that's funny because it's true. And dealing with that, or I dealt with that.
Yep.
And that alone, not only does it build likability and gets their defenses down, but it closes that credibility gap because it's hard to make someone laugh about a very niche business challenge that they're struggling with. And it shows that you understand their world and their pain. And to me, that's the real win of humor. Yes, self-deprecating is good because it shows you're not an arrogant salesperson who takes themselves super seriously and look at my car, look at my watch. You're just a regular person. I think humor has a multitude of purposes. As long as you know when to use it and how to use it, that's a really powerful weapon.
Any thoughts to wrap us up, John? Anything that, as you think about sales today, especially modern selling, what's top of mind for you?
I still come back to the fact that, look, we talked about discovery and how it's not the greatest. I just think not enough sellers really understand their buyers' worlds and how the company they represent can help improve those worlds and how to peel back the different layers of the onion to understand how much they can help, how, who else is affected by it. If they can do all that, I think results will be a lot better. But more importantly, if they can't uncover those things, they'll save a lot of time.
That's a really good point to end on, John. If you don't understand your buyer's world, start there. And if you're going to put it all on the seller, Well, now you're risking serious capital and potential business results. Where is the system, the structure, the infrastructure, the support, the money behind this to actually drive this? So, Jon, I know that folks could reach you at jonselig.com. So that's JONSELIG.com. My name is Ted Olson. It's been great to talk to you, Jon. Always good to talk to you. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, Ted.